to be here. Just to let you know, I'm nowhere as deep later. I'm kind of a quiet guy, kind of introverted, so I don't know a lot of you personally. I've met some of you, but I'm not the one who finds it easy to go around meeting people, but I'm sure that if I did, I would find your stories interesting. Today I'm going to talk about my story and where I came from and how I came to be doing what I'm doing. Of course, last month was the 25th anniversary of my comic strip, and there they are toasting with a nice frosty glass of Metamucil. When I started this strip about 25 years ago, I was a young man. I used to go give talks at places like Rotary clubs and schools, and people would see me for the first time, you know, because you're kind of anonymous drawing a comic strip. They don't really know what you look like, but they would see me and say, "Wow, we thought you'd be much older because you know all about old people." And now I go give talks and no one says that anymore. It's really sad. Well, I started out as a child. I had 3 older sisters, so I was the young prince of the family and spoiled rotten. And of course, my dream was to be a cowboy. I grew up in the era of Roy Rogers and Hopalong Cassidy, Red Ryder. So my heroes have always been cowboys. Unfortunately, living in the suburbs, there weren't many horses. I actually just wanted to be kind of the TV cowboy kind of guy, not the working one that actually got his hands dirty. Of course, I showed some early talent and genius for cartooning and artwork, as you can see by my baby book there. I started out mostly in abstract art and kind of worked toward realism later on. Strangely enough, I still can't draw bicycles any better than that. I never draw bicycles in my strip just because that's how they end up looking. Well, I was growing up in the 40s, or the 40s and the 50s, and so my first comics that I fell in love with were Pogo and Little Abner. I remember reading them with my dad and just being amazed at them and thinking, wow, what a great way to make a living that would be someday. I especially loved Fearless Foster. And I love the way he would get shot full of holes like that. It was kind of a comic strip within a comic strip. And I was heavily influenced by that. Here's a very early one of mine. My very first character I ever created was Billy the Big Black Bug. There he is shooting those same kind of holes in a worm there. You'll notice my signature at the bottom down there. I started writing in BC because right about that time, the comic strip BC appeared in our newspaper, and I loved it. It was so simple compared to the detailed drawings of Al Capp and Paul Kelly. And so I kind of adopted that signature for a while, you know, my initials being BC, and so my friends started calling me BC. And in fact, some of my friends I knew in elementary school still call me BC. And so I kind of adopted that style. And so because of that, it was quite a thrill a couple of years ago when Mason included me in one of his Sunday BC strips, me and Rick Kirkman. So that was a highlight. Here's another character I drew a lot as a kid. Mostly I drew characters with funny faces to kind of amuse my friends. This one was important to me because when I showed this for the first time to my friend Lloyd in the lunchroom in about 3rd or 4th grade, he started laughing so loud, so hard that the milk came out of his nose that he was drinking. And to a budding cartoonist, that's about the highest compliment you could possibly get. I've never actually repeated that feat again. I'm hoping to someday make someone laugh that hard again. Of course, as a kid in school, the best way to impress your friends is to draw caricatures of your teachers. This was Mr. Braga. And I cannot for the life of me remember why I thought it was funny to make him into a turtle, but at the time it seemed totally hilarious. And my friends thought so too. But as I got into high school, I started, I would sketch with a ballpoint pen. Those are just some things I clipped out. And these would be drawn while the teacher was droning away in the background. I should have been listening, but I found this more entertaining. First time I ever actually got paid for a cartoon was my first year in college. There was a contest to design a mascot for the school honor society. It had to be a Viking. That was the school symbol, and so the prize was $25. And it's not quite a Hagar the Horrible, but it was kind of cool to actually get paid for a drawing. I went on to draw some little spot cartoons for the school newspaper now and then. In the figure drawing classes, once in a while we would have an older model. And I always found them more interesting to draw than the young models, just because they had so much character in their faces. You could kind of read the lines on their faces, the story of their lives. You could tell if they've laughed a lot or frowned a lot. And so that may have been a harbinger of things to come for me, I guess. Well, another thing I did in college was meet my wife, Diana. We graduated together in 1973, and I went on to spend the next 20 years or so as a graphic designer, a paste-up artist, an illustrator, an art director, freelancer, all the time. By this time I had kind of forgotten or dismissed those childhood dreams of doing a comic strip because I just didn't think I had the talent for it. Especially the writing, I thought I could draw funny faces and funny cartoons, but I had no idea how you come up with ideas for a comic strip, and so I just wrote that off. I thought I would pursue artwork in a different way. And there's one of the little brochure I did as a freelancer. Brian Crane draws flies or anything else for money. And I did little samples of my work. As you can tell, I wasn't quite sure which style of drawing to stick with at that time. Some of them were really tight, some of them were really loose. And whenever I was designing an ad, if possible, I would use a cartoon instead of a photograph, if I could get away with that, because that was much more fun to me. One of our clients I worked for was the High Sierra Casino Hotel in Lake Tahoe, and I developed this little cowboy character that they used in all their advertising. It was very loose and squiggly line, kind of a Blackman influence there. We called him Howdy. Working for the local water utility company for their campaign to keep people using less water. I designed this little squiggly line character too. So whenever I could, I concluded a cartoon. That was an ad for the Nevada Department of Tourism. These are some things for the utility company too. It's always fun to kind of anthropomorphize household appliances. Well, about this time, by now we had about 7 kids. One of my daughters isn't in that picture there, but we had 7 kids. So my wife had always been a stay-at-home mom by choice. And so I was starting to wonder how I was going to keep putting Cheerios on the table for all these kids, and then you start thinking about college and weddings and things, and how are you going to pay for that? So I was looking for ways to increase the income. And one thing that kind of gave me an idea was, I was always the guy in the company who, when there was a birthday, they would say, "Hey Brian, would you draw a cartoon for so-and-so, it's her birthday today," and so I would draw a little cartoon card for them. Or if there was a new employee, "Would you draw a card for so-and-so?" Or if someone was leaving the company, "Would you go do a going-away card for Sally?" And so that kind of gave me the idea, well, maybe I could freelance maybe doing greeting cards. And so I started actually writing ideas for greeting cards and getting paid for that, getting them published. And that was kind of a breakthrough for me, because before I never thought of myself as someone who could write funny ideas. I just thought of myself as a cartoonist, but not a writer. But that kind of made me think of my childhood dream of being a cartoonist and doing a comic strip. So I thought, well, I'm almost 40 years old now. If I don't try it now, when will I? And so I started sketching little possible characters in my sketchbook. And it's a big decision, you know, when you're deciding what characters you want to do a comic strip about, because if you're at all successful, you could be drawing these same characters for the rest of your life. So it has to be characters that, that you really identify with and feel inspired by. So I tried different characters. Nothing really appealed to me. This character looked like kind of a Edward Asner, grouchy guy. And it wasn't until I drew this older couple that light bulb went off in my head. They reminded me of old people I knew and old people I hope to be someday, I guess. I don't know what I was thinking with the old lady's arms there. She looks like she's a bodybuilder or something. I had to try to figure out what they looked like from different angles and what kind of situations they would get into. And I had no idea how you went about getting a comic strip syndicated or into the newspapers. So I found this book in the public library by Whitmore Walker, Backstage of the Strip, which talked about how he got syndicated. And so I followed that advice and drew up a couple of dozen samples of my characters and sent them off. And you know, I knew that it was a long shot. They get thousands of submissions, and most of them just get a form rejection letter. So I sent it off to one syndicate and got a letter back saying, we like it, that we want to see more samples. Holy cow, I struck it rich. So I sent them some more samples and waited for the final approval and got rejected. Well, you don't succeed at first, try again. So I sent it off to another syndicate. And again, I got a nice personal letter saying, we like it, send us more samples. And I did. I got rejected again. So I tried it a third time. You know, third time's the charm. Sent it off to another syndicate. And I got another personal letter saying, we like the artwork, but we don't like the writing, so sorry. So 3 strikes, you're out. At that point, I really decided that I don't have what it takes to do a comic strip. What was I even thinking? And so I took all my samples and put them in a filing cabinet in a manila folder, and they would still be there to this day. If it hadn't been for this little lady here, who fortunately believed in my talent a lot more than I did. She kept telling me, well, send it in again, you know, don't give up. I kept telling her, oh, you know, you don't know what you're talking about. It's not going to go anywhere. It's just a waste of time. She wouldn't give up, though. She kept telling me, send it in again. So finally, just to get her off my back, I said, okay, I'll send it in one more time. About that time was right when Bert Breathitt had decided to retire Bloom County, which I love. And so in my naivete, I thought, well, maybe they're looking for an opening, maybe they have an opening for a cartoonist there. So I sent my samples in to the Washington Post Writers Group. And again, I got a very nice letter, this time from Al Leeds, the sales manager, saying, you know, we like your strip Opal. I don't know, bring up the name Opal for the strip, but they wanted to see more samples. Okay, I've been down this road before, so I didn't get too excited, so I sent them some more samples. And then I waited. And I waited, and I waited. It took months. They spent, I think it was like 9 months thinking about it. And then one day, I was in the shower, my wife knocked on the door and said, you got a phone call? It was Bill Dickens from the writers group telling me, you're in! So that was what was going on in my head right there. Then I realized I had to come up with some strips in a hurry. Back then, they weren't offering developmental contracts. It was just right into the comics pages. And so I had to hurry up and flesh out my characters and decide who they were going to be and all that. And so we launched on April 2nd, 1990 in 24 papers. And I was just hoping I had enough ideas. I'd done 24 samples, and I was hoping I had enough ideas for 20 more. One of the questions I get asked, probably the most commonly, is where did you get the name Pickles, and what does it mean? Well, you know, I think there's no actual peanuts in the Peanuts comic strip. But if, you know, Charlie Brown and Lucy are peanuts, then my characters are more like pickles, I guess. So maybe that's some rationale for it. But that's the name that and it's also the last name of the characters. I guess it can apply to the situations they get into, you know, getting yourself into a pickle. Not to be confused with the phrase getting pickled, which is a different comic strip entirely. And so there is the budding cartoonist pretending to draw as he poses for a publicity shot. It's amazing how the characters that I started out with have changed so much over the years. All of them have gone through massive transformations, and I guess that's common with a lot of comic strip characters. They kind of morph into their final self over the years. One thing that's different is I used to draw pupils inside their glasses. You know, you think need to draw eyes. I mean, eyes are important for giving expression to faces, you know. Eyes are the window of the soul. But somewhere along the line, I just decided I liked them better without eyeballs for some reason. Of course, I'm not without precedent in that regard. It's been done before. And in some of my previous cartoons in advertising, I drew characters without eyeballs. I think my main influence was George Booth. I always loved his New Yorker cartoons, and when he drew glasses on his characters, they usually didn't have eyeballs, so that was certainly a good example to follow. A few years ago, we had actually a look-alike contest for my characters, Earl and Opal, and the winners are these guys here. Is that amazing or what? It's a little scary to me. I don't think I would ever want to see a live-action Pickles movie. Well, this is how they look now. I think one of the characters that had the most extreme makeover was Sylvia, the daughter. There's a before and after of her. That was some plastic surgeon that handled that case, I think. I guess I thought she was too frumpy or something, but early on, I just didn't like the way she was looking, so that's the magic of being a cartoonist. You can change things like that really quickly. Now the grandson, Sylvia's son, Nelson, looks a lot different too. He was actually based on my son, Jonathan, at the time. He was like that. He's changed a little bit over the years. And as I started drawing this strip, I found that I was really inspired by the relationship between the grandparents and the grandson. And, you know, they have a generation between them, and so I guess you could say they have a common enemy. Yeah, now that I have 14 grandchildren of my own, I get a lot of personal experience with being a grandparent. And there's my grandson Josh kind of supervising me and offering a couple of critiques as I work. Now, in some comic strips, like Baby Blues, or For Better or For Worse, the characters, you see them grow up and mature, get older. In my case, my characters are always also at an age where if I let them get too much older, they'll be in the cemetery. So I've frozen them in time. Here, they're wondering, you know, they're kind of wishing that Nelson could stay that same sweet, innocent stage always, instead of turning into a rotten teenager, you know. And so Opal says, I know someday he's going to be a teenager. Can you imagine that? And so then, well, look at the bright side. Maybe we'll be dead by then. I passed this by Jim Boardman and Jerry Scott before I published it, and they both liked it a lot, so it's okay. This one I never actually submitted to the syndicates. I decided might be in bad taste. Nelson has a goldfish that's dying, and he's dug a little hole in the ground. He asked his grandfather to say a little prayer over it. So Earl says, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and in the Holy Ghost. Now, early on, I had an editor, Suzanne Welton, she was a single gal, and she kept trying to get me to do dating strips with Sylvia, having Sylvia date guys, you know. And I tried that, and I just I wasn't inspired. I didn't want to do dating strips. I tried a few, and then finally I decided to create this character, Dan, who was a wildlife photographer for National Geographic magazine. He ended up saving her from a bear attack. Actually, this whole week of bear attack strips wasn't run in Anchorage, Alaska, because there had been an actual fatal bear attack there, so they didn't run this series. But he saved her from this bear, and then they kind of started dating, and he ended up proposing to her in a gorilla outfit. There he asks her to say yes, and then we see the word yes from behind the couch. It's actually her mother saying yes. She says, "Mother, do you mind?" Well, this whole thing ended up taking a sinister turn. When Sylvia was meeting Dan's mother, she was a fortune teller in a carnival. So here they are meeting the mother, and you can see she's reading a crystal ball. And what's sinister about it is that after this appeared, I got an email in the mail from a man named Hussein Ishmael, and he's saying that I've drawn the name Allah in the crystal ball, and that I would profane Allah, and he's calling for action to be taken against me, which kind of sent a chill through my veins. Here's the picture he's talking about. That crystal ball, evidently, that says Allah in Arabic. Now, I don't understand Arabic. Does anyone here speak Arabic or read Arabic? I wrote back to him saying, I don't speak Arabic, it's just a squiggly line that I drew there. He didn't believe me. He said, no, that is the name of Allah, you profane Allah. So I was sitting on pins and needles for a while, wondering what was going to happen. But that was back in 1998, and I'm still here, so I guess I'm okay. I probably shouldn't have shown this. I might get in more trouble now. One of the characters of my strip actually became their car. When I first started the strip, they were just driving a generic cartoon car. And one day I saw this 1951 bullet-nosed Studebaker, and I thought, wow, that car has personality. And so I started using that whenever they drive their car. And whenever that appears, I get letters from Studebaker enthusiasts saying how much they like it. I enjoy doing the dog strips. This one is the first strip I ever had rejected by my editor. The dog is in front of the TV and there's an exercise program on. She says, come on, you viewers at home, let's go, let's go. I'm working the sweat. And let's go, lift those legs. And so the dog walks over the TV and lifts his leg. So I was told by my editor that you can't do that in a daily comic strip. But just recently, in the last year or so, I remember seeing that exact pose in a comic strip. I forget which one it was. It might have been Pearls Before Swine or something, but someone did that. So maybe the standards have changed. Let me try it again. But I hated to throw that idea away, so I kind of recycled it into this one, where Opal is on the ground doing her exercise, and the dog is there, and she says, don't bother me, Roscoe, I'm doing my leg lifts. Nothing takes the place of a good leg lift, and the dog says, tell me about it. Well, in this dog strip, Earl is sitting on the couch between his wife, Opal, and the dog, and the wife notices that he has his dog around, his wife notices that he has his arm around the dog and not her. And she calls that to his attention, so he puts his arm around her too. And then she notices that he's scratching the dog's head. So he starts scratching her head too. And she says, knock it off. And then walks out in a huff. And he says, there's just no pleasing some people. Well, another character is Muffin the cat, and she is inspired by several really mean, scratching cats that I had as a kid. And her personality is totally different than the dog, which I think this strip here kind of encapsulates what I think is the difference between dogs and cats. Here Opal is feeding the dog, and the dog thinks, wow, she feeds me every day and cares for my every need. She must be a god. And she feeds the cat. And the cat says, she feeds me every day and cares for my every need. I must be a god. Well, I work the old-fashioned way. I use the technology of the 14th century monk. I dip a pen in a bottle of ink the old-fashioned way and draw on paper. Start out on pencil, and then I go over it with ink, and then wait till the ink dries and erase the ink, or erase the pencil. A lot of times I get impatient and try to erase it before the ink is dried and smear it, but then I do yield to modern technology. I email it to my daughter Emily, who's right here, and she does the coloring for me. She started doing that a couple of years ago. It looks a lot better since she's been working for me. She actually cares about the colors. I don't really care what color the socks are or what color the drapes are, but she does, which is nice. She stays inside the lines and everything, so it's really good. You know, cartoonists always get asked, where do you get your ideas? You know, it's hard to explain, you know, exactly where they come from. They come from lots of different ways in my case. A lot of times it just starts with a phrase. Like I was thinking of the phrase, a power nap. You know, if there is such a thing as a power nap, what other things can be a power blank? So that inspired this strip here. Earl comes in and says, that was great. I just took a power nap. I love the concept of power naps. Instead of taking a long, drawn-out nap, you take a short, very intense one. It's much better. You cram all the rest you need into a few minutes. Now I'm going to take a power bath. And Opal says, I'll get them all. Well, sometimes I have to, when I'm trying to draw a character in a position or a pose, I don't know how to draw them, and I have to pose or have one of my family members pose for me, which makes some interesting photographs, make great blackmail for my kids later on, I'm sure. So that's how this one was done. And Earl sees his grandson, you know how kids like to sit different poses in a strip, in a chair. So he tries it, and then he needs Opal to call someone with a hoist to get him out of it. Well, in this strip here, where Opal was in the dairy case trying to get the freshest milk way at the back of the case, like climbing all the way in there. I actually tried to get my wife to pose for that, so I took her to the supermarket, and unfortunately, the real dairy cases don't have room for a person to get that far back, but I still had this fun photograph of her. A few years ago, I decided it would be fun to have Opal take a belly dancing class. And so I didn't know anything about belly dancing, so this was before the internet, so I went to the public library and looked for a belly dancing book. I couldn't find one. All I could find was this belly dancing record album. And so I decided, well, it's better than nothing, so I decided to check that out. As I was walking up to the librarian, all of a sudden I felt kind of self-conscious. I felt compelled to explain to her why I wanted a belly dancing album. And so I told her I do a comic strip called Pickles, and I wanted to do some strips about belly dancing. Now, believe it or not, she had heard of me, she liked my strip, and was aware of it. And believe it or not, she said, actually, I am a belly dancer. If you'll come back tomorrow, I'll bring you some belly dancing books and some videotapes. So I did. And I got like 2 weeks worth of belly dancing material. And I learned that belly dancing is actually very good exercise, which is what inspired this strip. There's the belly dancing instructor telling the class members how belly dancing incorporates the natural motions of the body, such as rolling, undulating, and vibrating. And Opal says, I don't know if this is for me. I was looking for something to stop my body from rolling, undulating, and vibrating. Well, my mother was a knitter. She always knitted. Her fingers were always knitting. She could knit in her sleep, I think. And so she's inspired a lot of knitting strips. And this one, Earl he sees this big, this long thing of knitting. finally ends up with Opal. She says, I started knitting a scarf and forgot to stop. Then he finds out it's for him. And then on the last panel on the park bench, he tells his friend, "You're sitting on my scarf." And his friend says, "Your scarf seems a tad long, Earl." "Oh, you noticed. My wife made it for me, so I'm sort of obligated to wear it." And he suggests he stuff in his pants, so he does. Does this look better? Well, I've also done a lot of strips about fabric stores because I hate going to fabric stores. And whenever I go to a fabric store with my wife, it seems like the clock just stands still and I see eternity stretching before me. And so here, Opal wants me to go to the store with him, the fabric store, and he says, "I can't, I'm having trouble with my eyes." "Oh, what's the problem?" "I can't see myself going to the fabric store." Well, ironically enough, I've started seeing my strip taped to the countertops in a lot of fabric stores, which tells me they have a very good sense of humor about themselves. So much so, this came to the attention of a fabric manufacturer, so that you can now go into stores and see Pickles fabrics for sale, which I find very ironic. You know? There's some lady who made an actual quilt out of them. Well, I had Earl, you know, Earl's at that age where you need to worry about your inner working. So here he's having a colonoscopy. And of course he gets a gastroenterologist who fancies himself as a kind of a comic magician. He actually kind of pretends to pull a rabbit out of his colon. And one thing I found out when I had a similar procedure was that they actually give you little photographs of the inside of your colon. Why? I don't know. What do you do with them? I wondered that, so I had Earl pose that question, and he decided he's going to use it in his Christmas newsletter. And after this appeared, I got a letter in the mail from one of my fans in Honolulu, and this is what he sent me. Christmas card with pictures of his healthy colon for everyone to enjoy. Well, that is one of several unforeseen consequences of comic strips. Here's another unforeseen consequence. I did this strip where Opal is trying to get Earl to get a hobby, and he says, well, he already has a hobby. He collects muskox figurines. Ceramic muskox figurines. Oh, yeah? Well, I've never seen your collection. I haven't found any yet. Well, after that appeared, guess what I started getting in the mail? My readers started sending me ceramic muskox figurines. I don't even know how they got my address, but... And then I did this strip where Earl got this book from his daughter called 1,000 Places to Go Before You Die. He says, apparently she thinks I'm going to die and she wants me to go someplace else to do it. After that appeared, I got in the mail this book from the author of that book, a signed copy, thanking me for it. I did this strip about, well, Sylvia thinks Earl smells like lemons. It turns out his wife is using lemon pledge on his head because she thinks it was part of the furniture. Anyway, after that appeared, guess what I got? Straight from the president of Johnson & Johnson, lemon pledge products. I mean, this went on and on. I did a strip about the garbage disposal getting clogged up. And guess what I got in the mail? From Incinerator, a super duty. Now, I didn't ask for any of these things. I didn't, solicit. They just came to my doorstep unsolicited. But I'm thinking, maybe I'm missing a real opportunity here. So, I don't know. It's worth a try. Well, aside from getting someone laughing so hard that milk comes out of their nose at your cartoon, one of the best rewards for a comic strip artist is seeing your work. My slide disappeared. It's supposed to be a picture of my strip on a refrigerator. So it's fun to see your work that someone actually takes the time to clip out and put some work, because comic strips have such a short shelf life that when they take the time to save it somewhere, it's really cool. Now, someone forwarded this to me from the internet. I don't deal with politics in my strip at all, but someone's noticed this, and if you look closely behind President Obama's hand there on the desk in the Oval Office, you will see what looks like a Sunday comic. Now, with my sources with the Washington Post, I was able to get an enlargement of this, an enhancement, and it's looking very familiar to me. And I thought, I think that might be my strip. I've actually nailed it down to which strip it was. It was a strip about gardening. Now, I don't know, I don't know if President Obama reads Pickles. I don't know. It's about gardening. Michelle likes to garden. Maybe Michelle put it there. Who knows? But the fact is, Pickles was on the desk in the president's office. Then my daughter Sarah, right there, showed me after this. She came home from a pet store. What did she show me? She taking a picture of there. With my comic strip. Basically, it was parrot toilet paper. So I went from the Oval Office. So thank you, Sarah, putting me in my place. Well, just as a final thing, I wanted to say thank you to my editor, Amy Lago, at the Washington Post Writers Group. To her assistant, Ann Himmelberg, and to the big boss, Alan Shearer. They've been so great to me over 25 years. I couldn't ask for better people to work with. And I want to thank you also for being here. That's my show. Anybody have any questions?